Hey guys, my name's Sam and welcome to Prep Medic. This week's video, we're going through some lesser known gear considerations for the SWAT paramedic. I've been a SWAT paramedic involved with law enforcement for about 6 years now, and over those years, I've learned a lot about kitting myself up, what I need, what I don't, and I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. All you have to do is go back and look at any of my early on SWAT medic gear videos to know that I've made some mistakes. So this week's video, I'm gonna go through some considerations, kit-siderations, I kind of like that pun, of medical gear and how a SWAT paramedic should be setting up their plate carrier, or some things to think about when they're doing so. Now, I do have a lot of videos going through exactly what I keep on this plate carrier on my belt, but this video I think will be a little bit more broad, something that I think a lot of different professionals can apply to their own situation. Some of these will work for you, some of them won't. Some of these I use and some of them I don't or cannot based on my own department's regulations. So keep that in mind as we go on. So number one, and I think the biggest thing that we lose sight of in the TACMED community is leave empty space on your gear. You don't want to fill every pocket to the brim, because then when you get to a mission that requires something special, you might not have room to put it on there and carry it in an ergonomic fashion. So for me, I have this guy here. This admin pouch is almost completely empty. I've got some syringes in it, but what I use this for is I use this for any specific handouts we get at the mission brief, any details about the suspect. I'll also take the controlled substances from our SWAT medic vehicle and I'll throw them in there so I have them readily available if the need arises during the call. Obviously, we're not bringing controlled substances home. Another thing that people oftentimes have to carry, especially the medic, is like a fire extinguisher, or if you're doing more of a riot control situation and you don't have like a specific riot gear set up, you know, having large things of pepper spray or other devices on you. So it's a good idea to have some kind of blank area on your plate carrier where you can easily add to it. All right, so number two, being able to customize your kit quickly is paramount. MOLLE is very hard to do, at least when you do it correctly. I can't tell you the number of people I see walking around with like the 2 MOLLE strips just connected to the top of it. Drives me absolutely insane. But if you're doing MOLLE correctly, it is not easy to exchange it. And this goes along with number one of keeping empty space. Maybe that's as much customization as you need. But for me, I don't like having multiple med setups for this, and then I have a plate carrier that we use on more like lightweight missions or backcountry stuff. So I don't like keeping 2 separate medical loadouts. So for this guy, I have a placard that I can just pull off this, put it on the other one. Or maybe we need to move a little bit lighter in the urban setting where this vest unfortunately is required, at least for my department. I can pull this off it and then go off of my belt or my backpack depending on what we need. Or if there's a situation where we're gonna have to prone out, I can pull that off. So being able to customize your kit is huge. Placards are a really big deal. Or, you know, if you have an insert with bungee cords that are pretty easy to get off and on, you can customize it internally. Just having ways to address the different requirements of each mission, because keeping the same setup for each mission just isn't realistic in most situations. All right, so number 3, consider mobility. Unlike a lot of the operators on a SWAT team, a medic does not do their main job standing up. I am not going to be standing up treating a victim just like we are here, which means that vests like this, I think this is a bulk cut or a spear cut from First Spear, this is their CJR optimized, it goes down really far. It covers a lot of my torso, which from a protection standpoint is great. From a standing up and fighting standpoint, really doesn't make much of a difference in my opinion in the urban setting. However, a medic works pretty much hunched over on the floor or, you know, sitting in an ambulance or in a Bearcat treating a victim. And that's where the mobility of a carrier like this can be problematic. Now, I've never had an issue with this carrier. I can move fine in it. But a lot of people, especially really skinny people, have a tough time with this when the vest isn't sized appropriately to them. So in that case, it might be better to go with a plate carrier or something a little bit smaller that comes up a little bit farther on the torso to allow you that mobility to actually do your job. So that's why I recommend training in your gear. If you're doing scenarios or officer down drills, have your gear on, see what works, see what doesn't. Now, I get it. A lot of times, this is not negotiable. A lot of times you get handed whatever you get handed from your department, and that's what you're going to be with for the remainder of your time on the TEMS team. However, if you do have a choice or if you can get these appropriately sized, I'd highly recommend doing it. A couple other things to consider here are like shoulder armor. Do you need this? For me, we're unarmed, so I'm not shouldering a rifle. Honestly, this doesn't make much of a difference to me. If it's really hot, it might, but most of the time this doesn't affect my mobility. But are you shouldering a rifle? Do you need to take these off? Look at not putting things on the side of your plate carrier if you're drawing a sidearm, not having anything on the right side, and then things on the front. Now, in the civilian environment, I don't feel like we have the need to lay prone most of the time. We're not taking cover behind little dirt banks or anything like that. But if laying prone is something that's in your mission set that you're gonna have to do regularly, maybe not putting a ton of stuff up front so you can actually get that mobility, get close to the ground. So all things to think about when setting up this gear. All right, so the next thing I wanna talk about, and this one's gonna be a little bit more controversial, is as a SWAT paramedic, you are not a mass casualty resource. And I see a ton of people get this wrong. They're coming in, we have some neighboring agencies that have TEMS teams, and they'll show up and they'll have like, their entire front side will have like 5 or 6 tourniquets on it on their kit. Then they'll have like another 2 on their belt. And then I'm sure if you opened up their medic pack, they'd have another 5 or 6 tourniquets in there along with a ton of chest shields and everything like this. If you are a mass casualty resource, you are probably not a SWAT paramedic. You are probably a rescue task force paramedic, so an RTF, whose main job is to respond to these mass casualty events and start evacuating victims quickly and performing basic life support, such as bleeding. As a SWAT medic, you are assigned to a SWAT team and your primary responsibility is that team. Now, you might branch off and deal with a potential victim in, a hostage situation or something like that, but your priority remains the team. That's why when I come into this, I have a tourniquet here, I've got a tourniquet on my belt, and then I think I carry 1 or 2 in my pack, along with basic bleeding control supplies, such as your packing gauze and your chest seals and your ETDs, things like that. But I take that a step further, and your kit should not just be stop the bleed kit, then in your backpack is stop the bleed kit. You should have levels of care. Any monkey can learn how to do stop the bleed. Every single operator on your team is probably carrying some kind of IFAK to stop the bleed. And guess what? Just because you have paramedic or EMT behind your name doesn't mean you're necessarily better at it than them. What you bring as a medical provider is an advanced skill set beyond that. So do you have airways? Do you have the ability to manage hypothermia? Do you have advanced moving supplies? Do you have ways to get vascular access? Supply medications, even do something like RSI or sedation for your really combative psychiatric patients. So those are considerations for you. You should not be carrying 10 million bleeding control supplies on you. That's just redundant and it's really not needed in these situations, considering all of your officers probably have their own stuff, and that's what you should be using first before using your supplies. So that's a little bit of a tangent, but just remember, you're not a mass casualty resource. That is a job of the RTF, the Rescue Task Force, in those situations. Moving on from that, the next thing we're talking about is minor issues affecting operators. We are all kitted out for the major bleeds, for the crazy airway scenarios, to intubate, to crike patients, to give medications. Awesome. But a lot of times what you're doing as a SWAT paramedic is taking care of small things, which is why I recommend everybody carry some kind of boo-boo kit, whether that's blister pads, ibuprofen, Tylenol, maybe not ibuprofen if you're going into a violent environment, but like Tylenol, things like that. These minor analgesia medications, things for migraines, electrolytes, stuff that you can give your people before they go into a mission to optimize their performance. Most of these guys and gals are probably not going to tell you that they've got a little bit of back pain unless they know that you're prepared to handle that. They'll say, hey man, my back doesn't hurt. Do you have some Tylenol for that? And you can give them that and help them go into that mission more prepared. So having a little boo-boo kit is huge. I don't think you necessarily have to have it on your vest or even on your backpack, but something that's easily accessible in the Bearcat or your response vehicle will make a huge difference for your people down the line. Moving right along, the next one I don't do myself because neither team I'm with actually has standardized IFAKs or locations, even though that's something they should have. So if your team has a standardized location of IFAKs and you're the team medic, you should have the exact same IFAK on your kit. So we might have our main workable space here. We might have, everything for our care, but our operators probably don't know where that stuff is and they shouldn't have to dig through it. So if they're carrying a small blowout kit, you should have that same blowout kit. So if you go down, they know where to reach, they know how to get your equipment, and they're not trying to go through your ALS backpack, digging through everything to find how to stop your massive extremity hemorrhage or what have you. So make sure you have the same kit on your stuff. Along those same lines is you shouldn't be running just a standard IFAK as a medic. So I'll give you an example. These kits here, this is a kit from Blue Force Gear. It's a great kit. I have put this on several builds. I even used to run it. This was one of the mistakes I made as a medic, but this is wholly inappropriate for a tactical medic, and I will show you why. So as a medic, you are working off of your vest, you're working off of your belt, your backpack, but you do have to be able to pack your stuff up and move on to the next. Just because you're treating a casualty doesn't mean your job is done. And chances are that casualty is not taking up everything you have in this front pouch. They're probably only using 1 or 2 items. So a kit like this, where I open this, and now this insert comes out, now I have to deal with this insert. And the second I take something out, start opening it up, this is not just easily foldable back in here. In the studio, I can do it pretty quick, but when stress is flowing, when people are dying around you, quite literally, this is not something I want to pay attention to, and I need a workspace in front of me. So while this works for an operator's blowout kit, they're stopping for 1 casualty, and that's probably all they'll have to do, or this is being used on them. That's awesome, but in reality for a medic, we have to be able to move on quickly, which is why I prefer pouches like this one, where I open it up, it stays on me, I can pull 1 or 2 items out, and I can close it back up relatively quickly and move on to the next patient. So make sure that what you have on you is workable. I wouldn't recommend this as your primary setup, to be completely honest with you. The last thing I want to talk about is being realistic with your gear. We all follow, St. Fisher, EBM, and we love the thought of, whole blood and finger thoracostomies and chest tubes and craniotomies and all these crazy interventions. But the reality is it something you're actually going to do in this environment? Are you carrying a Crite kit without a BVM present or coming to relatively rapidly? You probably don't need that scalpel for a finger Thor if it's not in your protocols and you're not about to perform it on people. So just have realistic expectations on what you're carrying, what you're going to be able to do right then, and what you're going to do on the way to the hospital. You don't need to be prepared for 100% of anything that could ever happen. That's a recipe to way overpack, which is something that I've been guilty of in the past. So take what the most common things you're going to face are, put them in your vest, have some less common things in your second line and third line gear, and you will be ready for almost every situation, but don't be unrealistic with what you're carrying on you just because it looks cool, you follow an Instagram page that says so, or even if I said that's something you should have on this channel. If it doesn't make sense for you, don't carry it because that's weight. Weight equals a decrease in mobility. So if you have any questions or anything to add in the comments down below, I'm sure there's a ton of stuff that I missed or didn't address in this video. Please do so, and I will see you next week.